Well, good evening and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I have the pleasure of every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. bringing you interviews with fascinating people. And, as we're supposed to be doing social distancing and physical distancing, I thought that, frankly, we should forget about social distancing and we should get closer together as people, even if we're physically distant. And I thought it would be great to chat with my mom, Flora Crombie, who is one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met on art appreciation. And maybe we'd have a chat about art and appreciating art for the benefit of all you listeners. And I think my mom has been a art and architecture academic in the past. That was one of the things she studied at University of Toronto just a few years ago. And then And then she was a docent at the Art Gallery of Ontario and a docent at the National Gallery of Art. And she's been kind enough to take me on tours through art galleries. And it's been fantastic because when you walk around with someone who's knowledgeable about art at a gallery, it's just an incredible experience. And I thought, we're all stuck at home and maybe you've got some kids or maybe you've got some interest yourself. But if you want to talk about art appreciation, there's no one better to guide us in that than Flora Crombie. So Flora Crombie, welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour.
Thank you, Brian. So if we're not going to be stuck at home, maybe we should talk a little bit about the fact that many galleries now have virtual tours. In fact, when I checked Wikipedia, I was told that there are about 14 world-class galleries right now that you can go and take a virtual tour.
Really? Fantastic.
Well, there's almost no better way to escape being isolated at home than to go for a tour of a beautiful art gallery. Now, don't do the overkill, because I always said to my students, look, if you go to an art gallery, limit your time, limit the number of things you look at. Try to really spend time on a few pictures instead of trying to see the whole gallery at once. I mean, an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours if you have a chair to sit on occasionally. But please don't try and take in everything at once.
And what's your favorite art gallery you've visited in real life, in person?
Well, that's very hard to narrow down because you like different galleries for different reasons. I am very fond of the McMichael Gallery, north of Toronto.
Yeah, the group of 7.
And well, yes, but they have basically Canadian painting, not limited to the group of 7. And there's something about it, the way it sits in nature, and most of the pictures are of nature, which I love.
Yep.
I'm very fond of the Art Gallery of Ontario because I spent quite a long time there touring basically high school students.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that was a challenge, let me tell you, because sometimes high school students are very hesitant to tell you what they think about anything. They want you to tell them, and then they want to get out and see the shops on Yonge Street.
Yep.
They're not that interested in spending any time looking at art. And then I guess my next favorite is our National Gallery here in Ottawa, because I've spent a lot of time in there. And I have not been a docent here. What I've done here is taken reproductions out to elementary schools. And talking about art with small children is lots of fun.
Oh, really? Very different than with teenagers.
Oh, very different. And very different from talking with adults, too. I would often start out with, what's your favorite color? Because often looking at pictures, favoritism really has a big point to start you looking at something.
Right.
You go to a room full of pictures. Why do you spot a particular picture and go to it?
And you think color is one of the reasons why?
Brian, have you got the picture of the Indian church, the Emily Carr, that you can show people?
Yeah, hold on one second.
This Emily Carr is in the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, and it's always been one of my favorites. I love green. Green is one of my favorite colors. But I love the way that church sort of just sits quietly there. Now, after talking about it with children, I've discovered that it's not really a particularly friendly picture because children are quick to point out there's no path to the front door.
That's true.
And
And
when
look at all the crosses. The cemetery is very evident.
exactly, when I asked them, could you go around behind? They looked at me and said, oh no, all the people that went to that church are dead and they're buried in behind. So that's the comment you would get from somebody in grade 4. But look at the trees. The trees are gorgeous. And look at the lines too. The trees are these great curving boughs, which kind of contrast to the straight lines of the church. And stop and think about the colors. Now, green does happen to be one of my favorite colors, which may be something that attracted me to it.
Right.
Green and blue are cool colors. So they kind of back away and the white comes forward.
Yep.
So even though she hasn't made a great effort to make that church look three-dimensional, when you look at it, it does seem to pop out towards you.
Because of the color.
Because of the colors.
Can you tell me anything about the artist?
Emily Carr was a well-known West Coast lady who did the rounds and did a lot of Indian settlements, First Nations, totem poles, very much against the clear cutting of lumber. Struggled. She wrote 3 books, I think, which are interesting for children to read. She struggled to make a living. At one point, she took in lodgers, and they said she had her dining room table on pulleys so she could pull it up to the ceiling, make room for her easel and her paintings when she was working at her artwork.
Oh, really?
She had a van, and she would actually live in the van for 2 or 3 days at a time, parked out in the woods somewhere so that she could paint in there.
There's a gallery, I believe, on Granville Island dedicated just to her. Is there not?
Well, she's an interesting person to follow. And while I'm at it, I should say, another thing that you could ask your children is how many female artists can you name? Or even an adult. Brian, how many female artists can you name?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I thought I'd put you on the spot there.
So are you suggesting that our attention has been too drawn to male artists over the years?
Yeah. Women artists really have a tough time and have for centuries had a struggle to maintain their position in the art world.
Really? That's fascinating. I never thought about that. Anyway, we're going to take a break for a message, and we're going to come right back in a minute with Flora Crombie, who's going to be telling us about a couple more of her favorite paintings from galleries both across Ontario and Canada, as well as across the world. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting with my mom, Flora Crombie, who is a art expert in my books and a wonderful lady, obviously. And she's been a docent at the Art Gallery of Ontario, and she took art from the National Gallery of Art out to elementary school kids. And she's walking us through appreciation of art. And she just showed us an Emily Carr painting, and she's now going to show us some more of her favorite paintings. Which is the next one, Mom?
I think I've got next Mount Robson, which is a beautiful picture of a mountain by one of the group of 7, Lauren Harris. There it is, gorgeous.
So tell us about this.
Well, I've got to explain Lauren Harris a bit. Thinking about music, some people like symphonic music, some people like chamber music, some people like jazz, and then you find a musician who actually plays all 3. Well, I guess Lauren Harris was a little bit of that. His early pictures were quite impressionistic, but later in his career, he became interested in transcendental meditation. And in this picture, any of you who have actually seen Mount Robson won't really recognize it in this picture. But isn't it gorgeous? I mean, you really feel the magnificence of that mountain looking at it.
Yeah, it really is.
You feel the sharp, jagged peaks. Now remember what I said about the colors? See how the white is coming forward and the black is almost receding.
Yep.
Over there, sort of to the right-hand side, it's almost like a dark hole. The blue of the sky is staying nicely behind the mountain, making it sort of be pushed forwards. And you can see bits and pieces of other mountains off to the side. But if you're a hiker or a mountain climber, you look at that and you say, no way, Jose, I'm not going to attempt to go anywhere near that mountain. It's majestic, it's gorgeous. And in a sense, that's what the group of 7 were trying to do. They were trying to show Canada as a big unexplored land that was different from all of the things that European artists were doing at that time, which is around the turn of the century, the last century, not this one.
Now you were saying that that white is a warm color. I thought white's a cold.
No. Well, white and black operate against each other. White comes forward, black goes back. If you put red or orange or yellow in a picture, it tends to come forward as a warm color, whereas the cool colors do tend to go back.
And is blue a cool color?
Blue is a cool color.
And so that's why it stays back behind the mountain.
Yep.
Excellent. What's next?
What's next? The Kiss by Klimt. This is in a beautiful, beautiful gallery, the Belvedere in Vienna. That whole setting in Vienna is worth seeing. And Klimt, again, was a strange artist. He changed in a way from being a decorator to being an artist. And in this picture, you can hardly discern where the two bodies start and begin and what sort of almost wallpaper.
Yep.
See here, this, I really wanted you to see this because of the goldy yellow and how it comes forward. It's a very, very two-dimensional picture. Look at the feet. You can see some feeling of two-dimensional or three-dimensionals maybe in the heads and the way her arm is around his neck. But basically, it's a very flat picture. But if you were to look at this from even, say, 2 meters back, that yellow would just pop right out at you. Vienna has to be high on my list of places to go and things to see there. Now let's come back to Canada and look at the Walking Woman. Now I like to contrast this with another work by Michael Snow, because I'm sure most of you know the geese. I think they're geese in the Eaton Center.
Yep.
Okay.
Up in the ceiling, up in the.
Yep. That's an earlier one. Or no, actually, I guess Walking Woman precedes it. But Michael Snow was an artist who liked to do different kinds of things. And here he's trying to show you how you can see motion in a picture. I'll always remember seeing a video, a short video that he himself filmed in Venice. And he called it Venetian Blind because he turned the camera on himself. He was sitting in the back of a gondola on one of the canals of Venice. And he said, I'm not going to see anything if I'm staring through the eye of the camera out at the city. So I would be Venetian blind.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's what I know about Michael Snow. He's still alive, by the way. He's about 91, I think, living in Hamilton and enjoying life, I gather.
And where's this piece?
Where is this piece? I think the AGO owns it, actually.
Uh-huh. So would I see it in the AGO if I toured there once things open up again?
You might. The AGO has quantities of stuff that they don't have on display all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go from this to a couple of Colville pictures. This is going to PEI. Colville, another Canadian artist, modern, very, very representational. You would say almost like a photograph, a slow, careful painter. Interesting pictures that always have sort of a double meaning. You look at it and you wonder, what is she looking at? And there is a man behind her. We can't see his face. And we can't really see all of her face because they're sort of hidden behind the field glasses that she's holding up to her eyes.
It's just beautiful.
Isn't it lovely?
Yeah.
Now, I brought you another Colville painting. It's very different.
Yep.
Can we see it too?
Yes, please.
There. I always took this to classes that I knew, well, grade 6, 7, 8. If you've got boys in the class, you can't show them any kind of a painting. They'll just sort of say, oh, that's pretty, I won't be bothered with it.
Right.
But this is another Colville. This is what I say, you can never be sure what kind of a painting an artist is going to come up with. Some of them are beautiful, some of them are ugly, and some of them are just interesting.
Yep.
And they're all worth looking at. The artist has some sort of a message that he's trying to give his public. And sometimes, well, we all come to look at something and we have some sort of subject matter in our own minds when we look at it.
The horse is just beautiful.
Now, he's managed to make you feel emotion in this picture.
Yep.
And that's why I wanted to contrast it with the walking woman. You get a better feeling of motion here than you did of the cutouts by Michael Snow?
No question. The horse and the hooves raising up and the smoke coming out of the chimney of the train.
Yeah, and even the curve of the railway track. Think if that railway had been going sort of straight across the painting instead of coming at us from an angle. We wouldn't have got that same feeling that it's rushing towards the horse. And you have this sort of feeling of doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And he's used the color so fantastically well. Often an artist can actually lead you into a picture by the colors that he uses. Here, the black of the horse or the darkness of the horse kind of echoes the darkness of the train. So your eye is led from one to the other.
It's just beautiful.
Some of the pictures from the Renaissance, you'll find an artist using little bits of red. And often they'll start down in the bottom right-hand corner of a picture, and little bits of red will lead you on a diagonal up through the picture, right up to the top left-hand corner. And I think I did give you a couple of older paintings. Oh, wait a minute, we should see the Claude Tocino next.
Well, we're going to see it right after a break for messages. So stay with us, everyone. We're going to come back with Flora Crombie talking about art appreciation today. Stay with us.
Okay. I might even have a drink of water. Is that allowed?
Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM. We're chatting with my mom, Flora Crombie, who is an expert in art and art appreciation, and she's walking me through some of her favorite paintings, or at least some paintings that she thinks people would appreciate taking a look at. So, Mom, we were going to go where next?
Claude Tocino, again at the AGO.
Okay.
It's a medallion. No, that one. All right. I said often an artist is giving you a message and you're not really quite sure what the message is. Some people wouldn't even bother to look at this. Here, I think Tocino is trying to tell you something about color. And I only have to look at that and stare at it for about 3 minutes and it spins. If you try it, I'm sure you'll see it actually is spinning. So that's another way that an artist can incorporate motion into his paintings, by the color he uses and how he applies the color. We've got a whole bunch of concentric circles. Again, a mixture of bright, warm colors that are coming forward and of blue and green that are going backwards. And they kind of bounce off each other. And that is part of what makes that thing work when you look at it. Now,
is this abstract art? What would you describe this?
Well, in a sense, it falls into the field of color painting. An artist who's just showing you something about how colors can work. It's not abstract in the sense that you can't sort of see a definite shape to it. I think of abstract art as being sort of weird and shapeless. This is a very definite and very controlled geometric shape.
Right.
But again, if you're going to be looking at art for any length of time, you need to think about how colors react against each other and how artists use it deliberately.
Yep.
So let's go from that to another group of 7 by Fred Varley. Group of 7 hardly ever did portraits, and this is one of the few. This was a student, actually, of Varley's. And I've had students look at this and say, I don't like it. She's not happy. She's sick. Her face is blue. Well, she looks lonely, doesn't she? All by herself, sitting there. It looks like a sort of a balcony or a front porch right on the edge of the mountains. Maybe she's a student at the Banff School of Fine Arts out west, away from her family. You could almost tell a story about that girl. I wonder. And he's chosen to use a deeper blue for her jacket. Again, that feeling of withdrawal, moving away from us, moving back a bit. It's almost sketch-like. Her hands are not fully formed. Her pants are just kind of sketched in there. And we're not really quite sure what's directly behind her, whether it's shrubbery or dead trees or what it is. But it's an interesting picture in that she is slightly off center too. It would be just boring, I think, if he put her in the exact center of the picture. But somehow he's managed to balance off her figure by the height of the hill to the right behind her.
That's fascinating that I think you're completely right in regards to the being off center rather than being centered. It makes it a lot more interesting.
It does. It really does.
It's probably a good suggestion for all of these amateur photographers that are taking pictures of people in landscapes that always put people in the center. And this is a good example of when it's not appropriate to put someone in the center.
But you do have to be careful because you don't want her to fall off the page. And that's why he sort of managed to keep her and anchor her there, partly by the railing that's sort of tying her down, you might say, off to the side beside her.
What's the significance of the post that sort of, she's hiding three-quarters of the post?
I would say it's just the corner post of the porch.
Yeah, but it's interesting that if you had the full post, that would be very dominating in the picture. And so by her right in front of the post, you know it's there, but you don't focus on it.
Yeah, yeah. Very carefully worked out. I mean, it may look like a sketch, a casual sketch, but it's been very, very carefully thought out. Some artists actually divide their background into a whole lot of sort of squares before they even begin to paint, so that they can figure out exactly where they want the skyline to be, the horizon line to be. And we don't have to necessarily know that, but we have to sense it, I think, when we look at it. I think of Japanese floral arrangers and how they seem to know. You can use like 3 or you can use 5, but you wouldn't ever use 4 blooms in a beautiful flower arrangement. Artists do the same kind of thing, juggling their pieces so that everything can be slightly off center and yet pleasing to the eye.
What's next?
All right, let's move on. Go back a few centuries. Say Paul the Hermit. All right, again, motion in a picture, drama in a picture, religion, I guess, in a picture. St. Paul being absolutely frightened. His hand is up in horror or exclamation. He's threadbare out in the wilderness somewhere. This is a very common kind of painting, Italian, and it's, I'm trying to think, it's in the Pretty, I think.
Someone's on a crucifix and behind him?
Yeah, somebody on the crucifix. Who would we imagine St. Paul would be mourning on the crucifix? St. Paul was not a Christian at that time. He was Saul at the time Jesus was crucified. And it almost looks like an open Bible on the table beside him.
Yep.
And there's another head down on the far right, somebody with a beard.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot to be read in some of these older paintings. You have to kind of figure out what's going on. Remember I said they often want you to sort of start down at the bottom right and make your way up through the picture to the top left? You see how that diagonal works in this picture?
Yep, for sure.
I wonder why. Is it the highlights on the body, even the highlights on his knees and the angle of his legs that
And
make
on his-
your eye travel
And on his toes.
up to whatever, is that a bird that we're seeing? I can't tell from this reproduction up at the top. Anyway, I thought I'd better throw in one or two of the older pictures just so you would know. All right, we're back to the group of 7. And this one is Wonder in Charlevoix Country by A.Y. Jackson. Now, A.Y. Jackson was actually known by the nickname of Père Roquette because he wore his snowshoes traversing over the countryside. This is after the First World War. And I think he was really suffering from the stress of being a war artist during the First World War. He
I
covered.
didn't know that. So he traveled to Europe and
He
was
was
an artist.
he was a war artist in the First World War. Yeah,
I did not know that. That's fascinating.
yeah. Canada commissioned several artists. There were 2 or 3. I think Charles Comfort actually was one also.
And that was because we didn't have photography at the time?
Well, no, but they figured artists could get a first-hand view and perhaps put more emotion into what they were seeing of the war than a photographer would do. But I remember hearing him talk about all of the snow paintings that he did when he came back. And he was kind of laughing about it, saying that as the war ended, he was posted to go to Russia. So the military gave him a great selection of white paint. And he said, I ended up being sent back to Canada with quantities of white paint. So that's why I painted so many snow. Yeah. So sometimes, you know, they paint what they can do. All right, Voice of Fire. This painting, they're still calling the painting that they paid a ridiculous price for. This is in our National Gallery here in Ottawa. The first time I saw it was at Expo 67, and it was actually commissioned. It's by an American artist by the name of Barnett Newman. The first time I saw it was in the big dome of the United States at Expo 67. It was commissioned for that exhibition. And then Canada bought it. And I'm not about to tell you, because I can't remember either, how much we paid for it. But people said, that's ridiculous. 3 stripes of color. Yep. Now, this does not do justice to it. The red is a bright, bright, bright red. And the blue is a little bit darker blue. And they're equal in size. It's very tall. They've got somebody there looking at it to give you an idea of the size of it. But the first time I saw it hanging on the wall in the National Gallery, I was with a tour guide who is an artist, and he made us all, well, about 12 ladies, sit down on the floor or on stools and stare at it. And we sat there and we stared and we stared. And if you can keep that group of ladies silent, staring at a picture for that length of time, it's got to be amazing. And you know, if you do that for long enough, you begin to see the sides, the lines between the red and the blue shake, quiver, curve in and out. And I thought, my goodness, it's a flame. That's why it's called Voice of Fire. If you really stare at it long enough, that red becomes a tongue of flame reaching up to the sky.
Really?
Fascinating. And it is amazing what artists can do with color. Now, very few people bother to stop and spend the time staring at that to let it happen. And I've also been told that it's now worth 3 times
what they
paid for it. People will say, what's a painting worth? Well, a painting is really only worth what galleries are willing to pay for it.
Yep.
You can compare it perhaps with some of our hockey players who are worth an awful lot when different teams want them.
No question.
10 years later, they're not worth enough. Who knows? Okay, another one from the last century. This is from the Detroit Institute of Fine Art, which is a lovely gallery, very close to Canada, easy to get to, and has an interesting collection. And here I would say, somebody who is interested in costuming. We often have people come through the galleries looking for costume design for plays that they're staging. And look at the details of costume here. Interesting neckline. One, Martha's probably the one that worked in the kitchen. Mary is the one that sat at Jesus' feet and listened to him. The one on the left looks like the one who sat or worked in the kitchen. Scarf around her neck, head sort of tied up.
Well, very intricate hair.
Yep. Hairstyles are totally different on the two of them. The one on the right's had curls put in, a comb in her hair, quite a fancy getup. Again, not much in the way of background. Some of the artists from the Italian later periods were actually supported by wealthy families. And while they couldn't have portraits done of themselves, they could have portraits done of themselves as biblical figures. That was acceptable, apparently.
Right.
And that's probably what happened here. Probably this woman was somebody, could have even been a courtesan in one of the Italian states at that time. But she appears here looking kind of blank-faced, not much expression on her face. And she's holding up a little flower, which is probably symbolic. Symbol of her own faith, symbol of her purity, who knows? Beautiful touches of costuming. It looks like maybe a satin robe over her arm and some lace just around her neck. All in all, a very, very interesting picture from the Italian collection. Now, another religious picture is this by the French Millet. It's in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. And you did ask me at the beginning some of my favorite galleries. Well, the Louvre is not one of my favorite galleries. It's
really? Why?
It's huge. It's too big. You'd need to stay in Paris for about 2 weeks to do justice to the Louvre. The Quai d'Orsay is a nice size, has a very interesting collection. And this is called the Gleaners, and it's poorer people who are collecting what's been left after the harvest. Millet wanted to show the ordinary people of the land, not the wealthy, not the ones who could commission portraits of themselves, but ordinary people doing an ordinary kind of job, bending over, bending down, picking up bits of leftover grain from the fields. Interesting in France, where you get these huge tracts of land and the farmers don't live on them. They actually live in the little towns and clusters, but the people go out from the towns to work in the fields. Again, I like the colors that are used in it. I like the groupings of the trees back behind. Hard to get much of a picture of the countryside. He's not that interested really in details of the countryside. He's far more interested in showing you these three ladies bent to their work. Yep. So I think that's it. I think we've finished all your paintings.
Well, that's wonderful. And where would you recommend people go to do some of these virtual tours if you advise them to do so?
Well, you can click on almost any gallery and say, do you have a virtual tour? And you'll be led into it. And think about beauty and realism. Some of the pictures we looked at were not particularly beautiful, but they had a message. And sometimes that's more worth looking at, you could say, than something that is simply beautiful. And don't be led astray by what I call favoritism. You know, something that's your favorite color, or maybe you like horses, so you go for the animals in a picture.
Right.
It's strange to think that what we have within ourselves and in our brain when we go into a gallery can dictate the choices we make and what we actually look at.
Yeah.
But I would urge you to take time, go up to the painting that you're looking at, read the card beside it, see what it says about the artist, when it was painted. Usually they'll even tell you whether it's oil on canvas or whether it's acrylic or something on board. I know some of the Emily Carrs, she ran out of money, and quite a few of her paintings are on cardboard.
Oh, really? On cardboard?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to try to surprise you here today and add another page, which is my favorite painting from my favorite museum. And I'm going to get it up here and let's see if you know it.
Oh my. Dutch. It's not the Night Watch.
It's the Night Watch.
Is it the Night Watch?
The Night Watch from the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam.
Okay. Okay.
And tell me, I've loved this painting. What do you think of it?
Well, did you realize that he painted each one of those guys separately as portraits, and each one of them had to pay? And this is how he survived for the next 5 years or something or other?
No, really? That's fascinating.
Yeah. But it is intriguing. It's showing you a mass of soldiers. I don't think you're seeing the whole thing here. I think this is just a little slice of it, actually.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. Possible.
Yeah, because it's much, much wider than that.
It's a massive painting, as I remember, right in the front, almost the front stairway of the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam.
Yeah. But again, you know, you can look at it and say, oh, yes, there's a little red there, that orangey color that's coming out. The white certainly comes out. And the black is making a dent kind of in the middle. The guy in black is standing forefront, but because of his black costume, he's pushed back a little bit, and the one in white is coming out in front of him.
Right. Well, let me see if I can find the whole Night's Watch, if I haven't got it all. What do you think of the Rijksmuseum?
Oh, it's so many years since I was there, I can hardly remember it.
No,
almost every city has an museum, and many of them are interesting to see. Well, I mean, if you go to New York, you've got to go to the Metropolitan, but it's too big. So again, like the Louvre, it should at least a week, if not more, to enjoy it.
Does that give you more of the painting?
National Gallery? Yeah, but not much more. There's still more that you should be seeing to the right and to the left.
Well, it's a beautiful painting, and I quite like it.
Good.
Well, Mom, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your appreciation of art with us. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed it, Brian. Encourage everybody to do some virtual tours while they're on holidays and take their children along.
And looking for color and looking for diagonals and looking for the meaning and things like that.
Looking for motion.
Motion.
How can an artist incorporate motion into their picture?
Well, Flora Crombie, thank you so much for your appreciation of art and for sharing your appreciation of art today with all of us and on numerous times in the past and taking me through galleries. And let's do it again sometime soon.
Okay, great. Enjoy it.
I love you, Mom.
Thank you.